Welcome to the Old Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
Good to see you, Dan.
Feels like it's been a while since we've recorded. I don't know why
It does
that
feel
is.
that way.
Yeah, it does. But Mike, so we're back. We're going to talk about The Grifters,
Fantastic film.
it's interesting. So The Grifters, I guess it came out in limited release December 7th, 1990. And then
Mhm.
it had a wider release in January of 91. And then it just came out in a 4K Criterion edition in January of
We
this
both have
year.
it.
And there it is, folks. I was going to do the whole episode like this, but with my
As a
sunglasses on.
homage for people listening, as an
Yeah.
homage to John Cusack, you put your sunglasses on.
Yeah. And they all have
They
them.
all have them.
They all have them. Yeah, it's a great cover. So it's really sort of somewhat this again becoming a new series on the podcast, a Criterion review, because I love these sets. Again, for those maybe new to the show, Mike's longtime physical media collector, still is, until the day that he or it dies. And
It will survive me.
It will survive you, yeah. And I sort of pivoted and went full on into digital, with the recent exception of Criterion releases, because you again gave me this great Sony player for Christmas, actually. And we kind of kicked things off with doing a review on Drugstore Cowboy. And I feel like, and we'll tell the viewers, the listeners, a little bit about how we arrived at The Grifters, because that was once again
Right.
not the first stop on this episode. But I couldn't think of it being more fitting to follow the Criterion review of Drugstore Cowboy, because I see a lot of parallels there.
And it's 1 year later.
Right.
It's an independent film, which was originally released by Miramax Films, which at the time it was released, Miramax was not a part of Disney.
Mm-hmm.
It became a part of Disney, and then they disintegrated it.
Mm-hmm.
But for people that want to get this movie after they hear what we have to say, you can find it the Miramax, which is quite good,
Cheap
for $10 on eBay. But you want to put the money in what Dan's holding, which is the Criterion 4K 2-disc edition.
This will set you back how much, Mike, for the
Well, if you buy smart, and every year Barnes and Noble and Amazon follows, usually has a 50% off sale.
Right.
So the most you should pay for it is $25.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it listed for $25 on eBay.
Now, I now have, and maybe we'll go down the list, right? But this will be an independent episode for each one. But I now have 6 Criterion releases.
And they're all 4K, I think, right?
Yeah, and these were scores for, the birthday. And I've got a beautiful box for the Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson. And a fantastic, I haven't even unwrapped this one yet, for Scarface, the original Scarface.
Which I don't think you've seen, right, with Paul Mooney.
I really haven't. Bits, but never
very
from
different.
Top to bottom. Yeah. The original Godzilla, a Shiro Honda classic.
I don't even own that on 4K. I have the Criterion. But
this was such an awesome one that, this Risky Business was a great pickup by you. I mean, I'm a huge Cruise fan. I love that film. I think he's underrated.
I didn't tell you, my plan originally was I was gonna give you one and then give you a gift card and let you pick.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing you, I thought, no, he'd rather get something than just a gift card. I'd rather the gift card.
Well, and I'm very indecisive, so it would have been a whole production trying to decide on what to get.
And it was for me. I had like 4 different shopping carts with different films, but ultimately I stuck with 4K,
right?
And I stuck with great films.
Can't go wrong. Now the Grifters, and again, the thing I love about these Criterion editions is the packaging. First of all, is great. And they're different, it kind of varies. Some have a slipcase that they're in and all of this. I currently have the Blu-ray disc in my player because I was watching a lot of the supplemental features that come
Right.
along with it, which we can talk about. And they always have, these cool booklets that are in there with a write-up. This one has a write-up by some writer by the name of Jeffrey O'Brien that talks a lot about Jim Thompson,
Right.
who wrote the novel that the film is based on.
Which I read years after I saw the
Did
film.
you with the constant, I'm always checking you on that. Like, okay, you read this one too? Come on.
I read it while I was in Florida. I was supposed to be studying for the bar
I was gonna
exam,
say,
and
was
I
it the law
skipped out.
school? Yeah, you read what, 4 books a day or something at that
It
time?
was
You did.
insane, and it wasn't
Yeah,
until when I was in law school, I had no time to read anything
well,
because you were reading
yeah.
1,000 pages of cases a
You
day.
you should have been studying a little bit better for the bar
I sh
exam, but
well,
yeah,
I never I wound up not even taking it.
right.
So, ultimately, I think I went the right way, and I rediscovered how much I loved reading
Yeah,
after
yeah.
law school. I hated it during.
Well, you haven't really helped my, reading comprehension because,
I'll
you keep
point
sending
out
me
a
these
couple of
discs.
things in the review that are different.
Yeah, so let me just kind of say at the top, and it's right here in the disc, but directed by Stephen Frears, who Dangerous Liaisons, and then what I had forgotten was he directed. What are you? Mike's holding up
That's
the
the
hit.
hit.
The hit, yes. But he had also directed in 2000 a film called High Fidelity, which also starred John Cusack
Yes,
and had a cameo, the first cameo by Bruce Springsteen,
that's
which
right.
was very, very
I
cool.
figured you'd come across that. He also
Absolutely.
directed My Beautiful Laundrette with Daniel Day-Lewis, who was a kid at the
Or
time.
wasn't that like his first film?
It's like
One
his
of his
first or
first.
second.
Yeah. So directed by Stephen Frears. What I didn't remember, Mike, a Martin Scorsese production, and Scorsese does a little bit of a narration at the beginning of the film as well.
Very brief,
Very
and the
brief, yeah.
reason for that narration is there. By the way, let me start out by saying the opening and the close of this movie got it so right and so
Yeah.
perfect. I don't think
Mhm,
there's another movie I can say the beginning and end are perfect, and in this
mhm.
case, they're just unbelievable.
Now we've mentioned John Cusack, who stars alongside Anjelica Huston and Annette Bening. Now, can you talk a little bit about Anjelica Huston's lineage?
Yeah, well, she's the daughter of the great John Huston, famously known for many projects, but The Maltese Falcon, maybe his most famous.
Any idea how many of his films you have in your collection? You must have The
John,
Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
I do have that one.
Yeah,
I have several, but
yeah.
honestly, it's not like the Coen brothers where I have every movie.
Mhm.
There's some of his movies I really don't like, but if you don't know who John Huston is or was, if you've seen Daniel Day-Lewis and There Will Be Blood, it's
Mhm.
totally based on he spent months,
Yeah,
actually 3 years to be exact,
that's a good reference, yeah.
getting John Huston's mannerisms, his speech down. So if
Right.
you've seen that film, which a lot of people have, it won the Oscar. No, it lost the Oscar to No Country for Old Men. But, if you
Yeah,
wanna know who
because
John Huston is, and Clint Eastwood, White Hunter, Pale Heart, is that the right title?
I think that's
I might have that
close if that's not
it's
exactly
close,
right. Yeah, that's pretty close.
but that
But
was also John Huston.
it's funny because you mentioned There Will Be Blood. You were thinking that was the Cohen brothers, and then we were talking about Thomas Anderson, who
Right.
has got one battle after another coming out. We just did a review on that trailer.
Yes.
But okay, so directed by Stephen Frears, screenplay by Donald Westlake, who did not want to do this. He did not want to
Initially
write.
said no, and
He said
it
no.
Frears
What
was like, "What?"
Well, because he said the characters are so dark, it's so depressing. I don't wanna I think he said, "I don't wanna live or spend this much time with these people."
And he read the Jim Thompson novel,
Correct.
and it focuses more on the John Cusack character and his salesman. First of all, we should identify what a grifter is, right? A
Yeah.
grifter is like a con man. It's kind of a fancy name for a con, and there's different types of con people.
The
I was
short
just
and the long con.
right. And here, the intro of this film was done by the writer. I would have sworn that was Scorsese's touch, but
Mhm.
at the time, Scorsese was working on Goodfellas. That's
That's
why he
right.
didn't direct this.
That's right, which ended up nominated for an Oscar that year.
Yes.
That along yeah, and it was so again, we bring this up sometimes, but that year for those Academy Awards, Dances with Wolves, and I actually have one of my favorite Kevin Costner films behind me in the poster, Open Range, which
Oh, yeah.
stars Annette Bening, actually.
I didn't know.
This
Oh, I didn't remember her from
Yeah,
that.
she's in Open Range, yeah. Godfather 3, Mike, which we did
Wow.
a whole episode devoted to Godfather 3.
And I
Uh,
knew that wouldn't win.
right. Goodfellas, and then Ghost and Awakenings. So there was a lot of but The Grifters was nominated for 4 Oscars.
It was, and won a couple of Golden Globes.
Mhm.
Anjelica Huston was already an
Yeah.
Oscar winner for Prizzi's Honor. So
Right.
she has the most street cred coming in.
Which was Jack Nicholson, right? Is that where they
Jack
met?
Nicholson was in Prizzi's Honor.
Because
Yeah,
they
they
were an
were a
item
couple
for a
for a
while.
long time.
Yeah, yeah.
But John Cusack at the time, and when I first went to see this, I was like, I don't
Well,
think he
he's like
fits.
Say Anything. He'd been in a lot of
Right.
those kinda John Hughes
Like
type
a
films.
teen kind of
Right,
actor, and this
right.
is his first dramatic spin, and it was
Wasn't he in 16 Candles too? Wasn't he one of the
I
supporting
think so,
characters, I
I
think?
think that is a bizarre
Yeah,
reference,
yeah.
but Annette Bening was the real unknown. Now, you mentioned Dangerous Liaisons, which Stephen Frears also directed. She auditioned
That's right.
and didn't get the part, and she got a part in a movie called Valmont, which
Right.
is based on the same play as Dangerous Liaisons. So
It's really
how
wild.
bizarre is that?
And that was, who was the director that Milos Forman
Yes.
she worked with, yeah.
If we
Uh,
did a 6 degrees of 7 Bacon with this, we would be
7
all over the
Bacon, 6
yeah,
degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Kevin
Yeah,
Bacon. We would be
yeah.
all over the map.
And we
There's
would
so
be all
many
over the map.
connections,
Anjelica Huston, she's so good in this film, and her look in this film is super cool.
which she
And
wasn't sold on at the beginning. She hated that wig.
right, well, and I had heard on one of the extras, the making of or something, that Sissy Spacek was one of several who was in line potentially to play that part.
Yeah, and I'll give you several others.
Spacek from like Carrie and
Let
Coal
me tell you
Miner's
who was
Daughter.
actually cast.
Oh yeah, this is like again, this is a segment on the Oh Brother podcast where Mike tells us
Yes.
other other
People
actors
who
that
were
were up.
cast.
Yes.
Melanie Griffith was
Ooh.
cast. Now you gotta remember
For wait, the Anjelica Huston role of Lily
no, she was, actually looked at for Myra.
from Myra.
In the
Yeah.
novel, she's called Moira. I always remember that.
Okay. I can see that though. I can see that.
Gina Davis was cast,
I can see
and for
that.
whatever reasons, they bailed,
Mhm.
and it opened the door for Anjelica Huston. Now, Sissy Spacek, you mentioned, Michelle Pfeiffer was also, in there,
Okay.
and so was Cher. But
Wow.
you
Oh,
now, when you think of the mother and the daughter, they have to look somewhat alike. You have to be able to swap them out, and that goes to the novel, and it plays out in the film as well.
but not mother and daughter in the film.
No, no, no. You're supposed to think you could mistake one for the other. Hence
Absolutely.
those like Sissy Spacek and
Yeah.
Annette Bening.
Well, there's a sequence in the film, well, not a sequence, but there's a couple of where Annette Bening and Anjelica Huston end up wearing the same dress.
Exactly.
which
and
is one of his
they get confused for each other in the movie
yeah, which
at
is
different
a
times.
pivotal point too at one point
But
in the
just to
film.
continue on the casting thing,
Yeah.
and man, I'm so bummed this isn't in the extras. Steve Buscemi
Mm.
was cast not in the he had a different role and he filmed it
Which
and they
one would
cut it.
which one was he?
It was a character that's not even in the movie.
Can you talk about two it's actually 3 actors, Mike, I want you to talk about. Stephen Tobolowsky. Can you talk about Stephen Tobolowsky?
Actually, I can't talk
So
about
he
him.
plays the jeweler.
Okay,
Not a
he's
huge but
needle-nosed Ned from
Needle Nose
Groundhog
Ned
Day.
from Groundhog Day, right, who's great in that little cameo that he
Yeah,
has
I
there.
shoulda I see, I don't know his name. I shoulda knew it right away.
And keeping with, the sort of, Emmett Walsh and these kind of talk about
Like,
JT Walsh as Cole Langley.
you've got the 3 main
So
stars,
good.
Anjelica Huston, John Cusack, Annette Bening. And,
Right.
okay, this is Miramax. They're not getting paid what
Mhm.
they would get paid. But Pat Hingle,
And
remember
you
him?
know what's Mike, Pat Hingle, the first thing that comes to mind when I see Pat Hingle, great character, another phenomenal look
Yep,
at this guy's resume. It's ridiculous.
it's
But
ridiculous.
but I can't I always think of, and we've done an episode on this devoted to this 1989 Batman,
Batman.
right? Eckhart, thinking, it was well, it wasn't that. He wasn't in that line, but he's great in Batman. So check Pat Hingle out if
He's
you
in all
haven't seen that.
4 of he was in the Tim Burton Batmans, and he
Yeah.
continued on as Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, he's so good. So
But
good.
JT Walsh, you mentioned, a fantastic character actor who died
Yes.
really young.
Very young, like 8 years or so after this film came out.
Yeah, it wasn't long. He
It's
did
terrible.
Breakdown with Kurt Russell
Right.
after this, and I think that was his last film.
Yes.
Charles Napier, who is a
Yes.
guy that's getting conned.
He's another great
Another great
character actor.
character actor. You're gonna
Fantastic.
if you watch this, and
Yeah.
obviously we're doing this episode to turn people on to this film.
Right.
If you watch this, you will see all these actors. You'll say, "Oh, I know him. I
It's a
know
lot of
her."
fun. That's one of the fun things about going back with some of these older films is to see
Classics.
in fact, Jeremy Piven is in this film.
Well, that whole sequence, the Navy,
Yes.
there's a sequence in the film where John Cusack is basically conning this group of sailors
On
with
on a on a on a train.
on a
Right.
train,
Yeah.
and he's playing dice with them.
Right.
And that's when Annette Bening discovers he's a grifter.
Yeah.
Those sailors were all part of, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to, the New Career Theater, New Crimes Theater.
Oh,
They
okay.
were all working together, and John
Working.
Cusack said, "Hey, I got guys that'll do the movie, and they'll do it for cheap."
Mhm.
Jeremy
Sure.
Piven happens to be one of them, who
Sure.
was just in something else we looked
Well,
at.
and it wouldn't be too many years after this that he would end up on the Larry Sanders Show, and then his career would eventually continue to take off. So
Entourage, I think people would know him
Entourage,
for.
absolutely, absolutely. Can you, Mike? Let's back up a little bit. Give the synopsis of this film.
Basically, it starts off with this fantastic introduction, starts with Anjelica Huston's character on screen,
Mhm.
and she's at the track, and like you said, there's a Martin Scorsese overdub explaining what she's doing.
Yeah,
And I won't
narration.
get into it, watch the movie,
Yeah.
but they were afraid people wouldn't understand the con she was doing. And it was basically back in the day, you could go to a racetrack in California and there would be a window of time where you could call the East Coast and say, here's the winners before the bets closed on the East Coast. So she's working for the mob. That's her grift. And she's also skimming from the mob, as we find out in the story.
Not a wise choice.
The screen splits. Enter John Cusack's character, small-time con man that's working alone by himself, taking
Mhm.
people at bars. It's great the way they show how he pulls off these cons. Split screen again. So now we got a three-way split
It's
screen,
a nice technique that Frears uses,
and
yeah.
Annette Bening comes in,
Mhm.
and we find out a little about her, but the unbelievable, and this is at a time where they have to film in real time with Steadicam, so they had to, like, count out the
Mhm.
beats, because at one point in the intro, they all turn around with a smile and the sunglasses,
That's right.
look in the camera,
That's
and
great.
then they go into their specific cons.
A great shot. Yeah, great
And
sequence.
it was, and that idea came from the writer, not the director, or not Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, it's a great sequence, f absolutely. You know, I don't know, Mike, if one thing that stood out again, I had not seen The Grifters in many, many years. It'd been a long time since I've seen the film, and I gotta tell you, the Criterion, the 4K transfer, the restoration, like, it's phenomenal. It was overseen by the DP of the film, and,
And you
Oliver
can always,
Stapleton,
you
just
know,
to
you're gonna get
credit him.
a good 4K disc when
Yeah.
it's got no extras other than a commentary, which is on a different part of the disc.
On this, you mean?
On any, like, if you're
Oh,
looking
yeah.
at 4K and it's loaded with extras and it's one disc,
But this is very satisfying, right? You've got a making of featurette. You've got a great interview with Annette Bening from
on the
last year.
Blu-ray, but that's
Oh,
not
you're
on
talking
the
about on the
4K.
4K. Oh, right.
I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the difference
Got
between
you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
just a 4K release
Correct.
and the Blu-ray with all
Right.
the
It's just
extras.
pristine
It's
with the
awesome.
4K. Oliver Stapleton, I mentioned as the cinematographer on this one, and the way he lights this film is so fantastic. I mean, there's some shots, the way he lights Annette Bening's face in some of the sequences is very stunning. But I don't know, Mike, Elmer Bernstein's or Bernstein, the score of this film, I'm not sure the film would hold up as well without the score.
Which, there's real irony there. If you listen to, I'm not sure if it's in the commentary or there's a long, like a feature length making of, and there's a woman, that's what it is. It's in the making of. There's a woman who talked to him after the final cut hit the theaters,
Mhm.
and he was basically chewing her ear, upset at how they used his score.
Mm,
Now, people wound up loving it like me and you and all
yeah,
the critics,
right.
and he grew to accept it, but he was not happy with what we saw in the final version, and it's shocking because, like you said, there's that dee, 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 like,
Yeah, the
there's this.
piano, this nice piano track, but it really helps the pacing of the film because it is, again, not having seen it in many years, the only criticism I think I have of it is the pacing at times. It feels a little slow seeing it today, a little bit.
Yeah, and it's also dark, which kinda
Yeah,
makes it feel slower,
right.
but when that piano comes in, it
Mm.
always lightens the mood.
You know, uh, Oliver Stapleton, again, I mentioned the DP. He did State and Maine, the
Right.
Cider House Rules, and
State and Maine was a play by,
well, it was
Glengarry.
directed by David Mamet.
Okay, and it's
Yeah,
his
David
play,
Mamet.
based on
Right,
his play.
right. So, anyways, he's got a lot of credits to his name. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned the critics now, and we oftentimes quote the review scores for like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. It's got a Metascore of 86, which that's about right, I think, for this film.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have it at 92%, the audience at 69%.
Wow, that
And
makes
tha
no
and
sense.
that's quite a few ratings on
And
Rotten
again, that's
Tomatoes.
why I really discount,
Yeah, again, for whatever it's worth,
like,
we
in
like to
one of the
mention that.
extras,
Yeah.
they get into box office, and this made
Mhm.
13,000,000 on a budget of 7.
Yeah.
So it was a successful film. Now today, that would be
Right.
crazy out of line,
By 1990 standards, yeah.
but box office doesn't mean jack. I
Right.
mean, what's the best movie of the last couple of years? It would, if you go by box office, it would be Deadpool. And both
Mhm.
of us agreed that although we liked it, it was the 3rd best.
Sure.
And I didn't really like it all that much.
Right, right. There's a great line in this film with when you spoiler alert, but midway through probably you realize that Annette Bening is also on the grift. She's had a long history of working with other long con men, if you will.
Right.
JT Walsh, as they show
Being
in the
like her
film.
mentor.
Yeah, JT Walsh was her partner at the time, and she was the best I think she calls herself a long con roper, where she
Yes.
would basically reel these guys in, like Charles Napier, the actor you mentioned. And but there's a line where this reveal happens, and it's her and John Cusack's character, Roy, having dinner. And she says, I've kissed a lot of freaking frogs, and you're my prince, basically.
Yeah.
She wants to hitch her wagon to him, essentially, because she sees something in him.
And we learn in flashbacks that the way John Cusack, Roy, was taught
Mhm.
how to con people is don't go long con, because when you
Right.
do that, you're going to wind up a victim of a good partner.
Do you have the name? There's another great character actor, but I couldn't place his name. The guy that early in the film we see flashbacks to where he wants to learn from this guy who's a very kind of sage of
Henry
grifting.
Jones. Henry
Henry
Jones.
Jones. Thank
And
you.
2
Yeah,
other names I want to mention.
sure.
The only other person considered, Frears picked Cusack early on, but
Yeah.
the other guy that was close was Robert Downey Jr.
Oh,
And I know he would have pulled this off,
yeah.
even though he seems to be a one note kind of actor.
Right.
But I think that, and the other name, Dan, and I don't know if you know this yet, digging into the extras, do you know Ricky Jay?
Oh, from The Magician?
Yes.
Yes. Is he in this?
No, he was John Cusack's grifter teacher.
Oh, like
He was
consultant.
right. The Henry Jones character was really
Wow.
Ricky Jay
I didn't
in real
know that.
life. Now, do you remember we saw him in
Yeah, but
person?
wait, is Henry Jones? I don't think. Looking at
Maybe I
IMDb,
have the wrong
yeah,
name.
I don't think that's him. It's someone else, but I don't think there's a photo on IMDb, and I just can't place. So apologies for those if you're watching or listening. Please drop some comments or send us a fan mail through the audio episode and let us know who we're talking about
He's
here.
recognizable, but I just,
He absolutely is. Yeah, it's like in the Pat Hingle universe, he's
right.
kind of in that.
But you
But
and I
but Ricky
saw
J.
Ricky Jay.
No, you're thinking of the great. No, you're confused. Randy,
Oh, the
the
amazing
amazing
Randy.
Randy.
Wow. Yeah, and those
Yes,
2 are kind of
they're very
interchangeable.
similar. And we saw the
We
amazing,
saw
not
them.
Kreskin, but we saw the amazing Randy at the nearby college that we both went to, and that was pretty
I
phenomenal.
thought
But
that was Ricky
no,
Jay.
Ricky Jay, no. But I think Ricky Jay appeared in The Sopranos, if I'm not mistaken, too, at
He's
some
been in a
point.
lot of Mamet
Anyways,
films. He was in The
yeah,
Heist. He was in,
State
uh
Maine, he might have been in actually.
probably. He was in a
Maybe,
lot
yeah,
of them because
yeah.
he did a lot of his work on Broadway.
Mike, let me ask you. So there's a sequence I didn't quite get this, but can you talk about this sequence where you mentioned Angelica Houston's character Lily is working for the mob, and
Yeah,
Pat Hingle is
Bobo,
Bobo
Brazil.
what?
Brazil.
No, Bobo, no, Bobo Brazil.
Was
Where
that
the
that's
hell
a
are you?
wrestler. That's a
Is
wrestler.
there a wrestler Bobo Brazil?
There
Now,
was.
folks, as of this recording, we're coming off WrestleMania weekend, so you have to excuse Mike. He's a little bit clouded. No, it's Bobo. Hold on, I'll get it here, folks. Here,
God,
just
I
a
wrote it
second.
down
We'll get
somewhere.
Bobo Justice. Bobo
Bobo
Justice.
Justice.
Bo, Bobo Brazil. I love it. Hats
Wrestling
off to Bobo.
fans, if they tune
They're
in, they're
loving
gonna
that.
love
Yes,
that.
2 thumbs up. Rexer's giving you 2 thumbs up on that. that
No,
reference?
he's not a wrestling
He's
guy.
not a wrestling fan? Oh, I thought he
No,
was in that realm too. Okay.
no.
Well, there's a guy, isn't there one of the in the Rexer universe that is a big wrestling guy like you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if
But
Kev watches now and then. He might be a
Kev's right,
casual.
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, so she's working for the mob. Pat Hengel is kind of the mob boss.
Mhm.
And you said she's skimming and she gets found out.
Yes.
And there's this very tense sequence where he summons her basically.
Yep.
And can you talk about that sequence a little bit? But then I have a question for you about it that I don't understand.
Well, she knows she's in trouble.
Yeah.
Just getting
And
a visit from
it
Bobo.
it involves oranges. I'll just say that.
Right. And he's got her in the car and he asks her a question. I think, "Are you stealing from me?" or something similar. And she gives an answer and he says, "Do you want to stick with that answer or do you want to keep your teeth?" And
Right.
Anjelica Huston instantly, "I want to keep my teeth." She knows what's
Mhm.
ahead. He says, "Do you have a long dress or a long coat
Mhm.
in the car?" "No, I don't." So basically, he's taking her back to a hotel where he's staying, luxurious.
Oh, okay. I thought it
He
was his mansion or something, but
No, this is like, they're on the
is
road at the
yeah.
time.
Okay, right.
And it's funny how Anjelica Huston says Los Angeles,
Los Angeles, yeah.
I
It's
think
cool.
she's digging in the 40s because this is a
Mhm.
really interesting timeline film.
Yeah, and in what sense, Mike, is this related, within the film noir genre?
Well, very much on the women's side, like, and if you watch the extra interview, which is exclusively on the Criterion with Annette Bening, she talks about how Stephen Frears said, "Watch Gloria Graham."
And Gloria, of course, we talked about her because she was in It's a Wonderful Life. We watched that back during the holidays,
Yes.
and she's kind of the, what would you say, the minx, the,
She was,
bad girl in It's a
fantastic
Wonderful Life. Yeah.
in Big Heat. She was in with
Mhm,
Humphrey Bogart in A Lonely Place. Then she did Oklahoma, and
mhm.
she became difficult to work with, and that ended her career.
Yeah,
But Annette Bening is absolutely channeling Gloria Graham.
sure.
Look her up, Gloria Graham, Graham with an E on the end,
Mhm.
and if you know any of those films, that's who Annette Bening is channeling. But to get back to that sequence, that's really a lot longer in the book.
Mhm.
Bobo is taking her back to where he's staying to basically torture her. And
Yeah.
you mentioned a bag of oranges. He says, "Do you know about the oranges, Lily?"
Yeah, he's telling her this story, and
And she knows it.
meanwhile, she's
He's
putting these
telling
oranges in
her,
a towel and
yep, he kicks
only
over the bag of oranges and he throws the towel.
yeah.
Says, "Why don't you
It
put
it
those in there?"
it's basically a story about how I forget who he was referencing, but this group or whoever it was he was talking about in mythology or something where they would take the oranges, wrap them up in a towel, and then beat
Yep.
someone because they didn't leave, visible markings but they just hurt you just enough to sort of
In
send
the
a message.
internal damage. Now,
The internal
it's
damage, yeah,
very, very graphic
right.
in
But
the book.
he does not end
He
up
doesn't go
assaulting her,
through with it.
ironically, with that. However, what he does do is he puts a cigar to her hand and leaves this huge mark, which plays a part in the film later
Correct.
in the film. But what I didn't get in that sequence was why does he make her wear a raincoat? I don't get it.
Well,
It certainly doesn't cover up the marking on her hand.
no, if you read the novel, you'd know
Okay.
why.
It's a reference from the novel. Okay.
Yes, because he does do the oranges in the novel, and she soils herself so bad,
Mm,
it stains her dress, and the raincoat is meant to hide
interesting.
all that.
Okay. And maybe there was some other abuse that took place that we just don't see, but it's implied.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of
And
it.
and I think he mentions that group you had referenced to
Mhm.
kinda say to people, "Go look this up." Just
Right.
like JT Walsh's character goes crazy
Mhm.
And there's a line where John Cusack's asking Annette Bening, "What happened to your mentor?" And she says, he went away to Atascadero.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean anything to us in America, but if you say that to somebody from England,
Mhm.
they know right away what you're talking about. It's a mental
Right.
institution,
Right.
and I guess it's where they keep people that just, can't be in society.
It was interesting too because in that sequence, he he punches her in the stomach. He
That's how it
does he
starts.
Yeah, he does punch her in the stomach.
Yep.
And then there's another sequence where John Cusack, I think, doesn't he punches Annette Bening's character in the
He
stomach.
slaps her,
But
and
there's
this is
another part.
right
Oh,
out
no,
of
no,
the
no, it's John Cusack, Roy's character.
slapping
Wait,
Mira.
no, he gets punched in the stomach when he's trying to grift a guy at a
Oh, okay, that's
bar.
early on,
He's
yes.
got this move where he takes a $20 bill
Yep.
and orders a drink, but
Holds it
underneath
up.
it, he's got like a 5.
Right, he holds it up so the bartender's looking at the 20, and he says, "Give me a
Yes,
beer." And
right.
then he puts his hand down with the 20, and that's Dan's holding up the pitcher,
Yeah.
and he shifts the 20 to a 5,
Mhm.
and the bartender thinking, "Okay, I saw the 20," he put it down, gives him change for the 20.
Right.
It's a grift.
And the guy caught him, and he took a baseball bat or something and jammed him in the stomach, and it was
Yeah.
kinda weird because it took him, like, a week and a half to recover from
Well, he
it.
wound up in the
He was
hospital,
in the
but
hospital for a while.
if you notice, John Cusack talks about this in the commentary or the
Mhm.
extras, where there's like a big matted, Frears was afraid that John would get hurt. So he
Mm.
wore like this umpire kind of thing,
That's funny.
and you could see it.
Oh, and I see, I
It's
didn't pick up on that. That's
yeah.
interesting.
See, if you watch it again, you'll see it.
Didn't you feel like, and I mentioned earlier that we had sort of kicked off our Criterion series talking about Drugstore Cowboy,
Yeah.
and I really felt a lot of parallels here, especially with Anjelica Huston's character and Kelly Lynch's character in Drugstore Cowboy, and even some of the themes of the films. Was that popping up for you at all? Were you thinking about
It
Drugstore
didn't.
Cowboy at all? No. I mean,
I
they're of the
actually
same
thought
era
about
as
it.
well.
Right. I thought about it because we had done it and that it was also an independent, fantastic film. Another Roger Ebert 100 that he's the reason I went to see this.
Well, also, Mike, because also written by novelists who have kind of dark backgrounds. Both Jim Thompson and Drugstore Cowboy.
Right.
Can you pull that author out
I
of
forget his
top of your head?
name
But
off the
anyways,
top of my head, but he
yeah,
was a real live drugstore cowboy.
exactly right.
And the issue with Jim Thompson was he was a drinker.
Mhm.
And if you watch the extras or listen to the commentary, they talk about how he kind of influences what's happening on screen through his writing through the eyes of a drunk.
Now, did you know, although he didn't end up really utilizing or taking him up on it, but did you know that Thompson collaborated with Kubrick on a
Yes,
couple of projects?
he did. He did The Killing, that was based on Thompson, and
That's right.
Paths of Glory.
Well, it sounds like in reading, in the booklet of the Criterion edition, really that actually didn't go anywhere. But
Which
what he wrote, what he collaborated on with Kubrick for those couple of films, Paths of Glory and The
he's
Killing.
listed in the
Is he
credits on
listed?
both.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Okay,
mhm,
interesting. Jim Thompson also wrote The Getaway, which was a great
that's
film,
right. And people
and a
might
great
know
remake as well.
right, people will probably know Alec Baldwin, Kim Basinger, but they won't know Steve McQueen, Ally McGraw,
That's true. That's
which I think
true.
is the better film.
I'm sure you're right about that. Well, this, again, it's always enjoyable to go back to these films because this was also one of those we talked about. Guarantee we saw this in the theater.
Mhm.
I was kind of a new resident to Florida at the time, and so I moved down, and you and I were catching a lot of films in the theater at that
Oh,
point.
yeah.
And this was definitely one of them. But and one of the things too you mentioned about the how interesting it is to now see some of the actors that pop up who are now, you know, very well known and very
or no
famous and
longer
well
with
known,
us.
or no longer with us. Yeah, that's like JT Walsh, for example. The ending of the film, I won't give anything away, but
No,
I forgot
stunning.
I forgot the impact of the ending of this film, which is very stunning, and I guess in true Jim Thompson fashion too. I don't know how accurate it is to the ending in the novel. Do you recall? Is it pretty note for
It's
note? Or
very accurate,
okay.
and there's a lot of dialogue right from the novel.
Mhm.
Um, a good example is Lily
Mhm.
when John Cusack goes to the hospital
Right.
and the doctor is tending after him and putting him in the ambulance, and
Mhm.
Lily says, "You know who I work for?" And the guy kind of nods. He says, "You make my son well, or I will have him kill you." And
Yes,
she
that's
says
right.
it
That's right.
matter of factly,
Yeah.
right out of the novel.
It's I really enjoyed going back and viewing it. I love, again, it's another great addition to my Criterion collection. Obviously, you're getting 2 thumbs up, a strong recommendation from us to at least view the film. We're not saying you have to pick up the Criterion edition, but if you are gonna purchase the film,
That's the
this
way to
would
go.
this would be the way to go for sure.
And you
Yeah.
can rent it. I actually did a recommendation for this on our site that nobody looked at.
That's
So,
true.
and our hope when we do a film like this is a 35 anniversary of this film. And you're going to the anniversary of this film soon,
That's right,
which
Revenge
is
of the
what?
Sith.
20
20
years.
years. Yeah.
This is 35 years old. It would play today
Yeah,
if they put
it's
it in a cinema.
it's very good. I thoroughly enjoyed going back and checking this one out. Any final thoughts on this one from you, Mike?
You know,
Anything
we
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 haven't covered?
really didn't give away much of the story
No.
about each individual,
And that's
and that's
intentional.
right, and that's what you'll love. This is a
Yeah.
great story from 3 different perspectives, and there's also, and I said this in the recommendation, it's part film noir,
Mhm.
part crime, because Jim Thompson's known for crime. He's like a Ray Chandler type. He's
Right.
known for crime
Mhm.
books,
Mhm.
but it's also a love triangle in sorts,
And
and
an
there's
Oedipus story.
an Oedipus story to
Yeah,
boot. So it's
that's
got
right.
all of those elements and it mixes them perfectly.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I mentioned Drugstore Cowboy. I think one of the things for me, if we're talking about the themes of the film, deception, those kind of things that are sort of obvious in it. But the cost of the grift and again, and similar to the Drugstore Cowboy, where right, it's this the line that you quoted by Matt Dillon's character, right? You only have to, they're constantly chasing what is it, chasing the dragon or whatever that drug
Right.
reference is, right? They're always chasing that next high.
You know
And
what?
similar in this way, but yet it leads to this very lonely existence at the end of the day.
Right. A movie came on last night, a gambling movie with Matt Damon.
21. Oh, no,
No,
Rounders, Rounders.
Rounders.
Yeah, sorry.
Another great recommendation.
21, that's a Kevin
But the
Spacey.
first line is he's talking about playing cards. He says, if you sit down to play cards and you don't spot the sucker in the first 5 minutes, then you're the sucker.
Yes, yes.
He's like, they, in that film, they use the terminology grinders. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's the same as a grifter.
Rounders. Yeah,
Yeah. But,
Rounders.
people who grind it out,
Yeah, yeah,
grinders.
right.
So that's very much a theme. Like when I watched it, I was like, wow, how coincidental that this comes on tonight
Yeah.
because I knew we were doing this review.
Well, I don't want to hold you up much longer. I know you got to get to you got a very important sports event that's coming on soon. Mike is sporting
Champs.
his Boston Celtics shirt. They're going to obviously go on to win the championship again this year.
Hope
No
so.
doubt about that. Yeah. Um, I just want to say, Mike, for all of you out there who have taken the time to uh, press click on the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. We're very, very appreciative of that. And also for those of you that, whether you follow us or not, or you've subscribed or not, the engagement that we get out on the channel has been fantastic. And I got to say, there was one, in fact, Mike, it was so good. Let me just acknowledge at least, let's see. Okay.
This is based on our review
Of
of
Wicked,
Wicked.
which has gotten a lot of feedback, as we knew it would. But we got this comment from a user with the handle Inferno Mutant, and wow, I mean, I would encourage folks to go and read their comment to us because
Well,
they broke down they gave such a great analysis that tied in the novels and the original film and Wicked and
and
the
the stage
musical.
play, yeah,
It was really phenomenal.
it
Great
was,
education for us.
and it gave me, like, I was begging for context,
Mhm.
and
And you got it.
somebody finally delivered.
You
Now,
got
it
it.
didn't change my opinion. They didn't
No,
change my mind,
no,
but
sure.
I now understand why certain decisions were made.
Yeah, yeah. But I just wanted to point out, because there's a lot of podcasts out there, there's a lot of channels out there that you can follow, you can subscribe to. So for the folks that have subscribed to the channel, Mike and I are, continue to be appreciative. Again, we love the engagement there. We're pretty active on Instagram, so if you want to kind of follow us on social media, I would say at OHB, B as in brother podcast, OHB podcast. That's our handle out there. You can follow us on Instagram and interact with us there as well. We love responding to all the comments, and we try to do so in a pretty timely fashion, whether it's Mike or myself getting back to you. But just appreciate all the support, and also, if you prefer to listen to your podcast, because we've been getting consistent traffic on the audio podcast, so you can find the show on any podcast player. We're on all of the podcast players. So, Mike, listen, Grifters, the Criterion Collection, it is now in the O Brother podcast archives. This was a great pickup, a great gift. It was a great grift,
Yeah,
Mike.
and I'm
So
glad after, because I had seen it not long ago, so I'm
yeah,
glad that you were able to catch it,
yeah.
and I'm sure there was stuff in there you had forgotten.
Now the question is, Mike, what is going to be next in our Criterion series? Will it be one of these?
I don't know,
Will it be something I haven't yet received or purchased for myself? I don't know. We'll have to
perhaps.
see. Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the Over the Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Watch out for that grift.